The first thing you should know about the USS Christopher and the new US alternative destroyer line as a whole is that the armor piercing is massively improved and really good. Take a look at this Neptune here. He's about 8-9 kilometers away from us over an island. I realize he's a Neptune, so of course not the most heavily armored cruiser in the world, but, well, that's 9 citadels on him. We would go on to win that game. It's a bit of a boring blowout, I think, so I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but just wanted to show you that little clip to demonstrate how good the AP can be against broadside cruisers. And it's not just lightly armored ones like Neptune that you can do this to. I've had results like that against the Des Moines, for example. Now, I've got 2 games for you in the USS Christopher. This first one here on the Haven map, I'll show you the build. We are running the new commander Ernest E. Evans, but in the second video I show you, or the second battle rather, we'll be using a Vincent Mordoff build, and I honestly can't decide what is the best way to go for this ship or this line as a whole. I spent an awfully long time fiddling around with different commander builds. I think Evans is okay. I've also tried Burke though. My thought was this ship and this line in particular, if you can build into the range with Arleigh Burke and extend it, well, you have really fast shell velocity, and so you can more easily hit targets at longer range. If you're engaging with an enemy destroyer, for example, and it's in a range of, let's say, 7-8 kilometers, you're probably going to have an easier time landing shells on them than they will you. If it's something like a legitimate gunboat, for example, Gearing, Daring, those kind of ships with really fast reloads, they tend to have floaty shells. That's not really the case here, although I strayed away from the Arleigh Burke build because while it is nice to extend the range on these guns, this line, especially the Christopher and the Burrows at the highest tiers, have absolutely abysmal kiting angles, and so I don't think it's ideal. But I'll tell you another thing about this AP. You see there that shot against the Christopher, 2 over penetrations, right? Well, look at these next subsequent shots. There's 5 over pens, and then he angles slightly more. 6 full pens for over 5,000 damage in 1 salvo. And again, another 5 full pens and 1 over pen for about 5k. Sometimes I've found you want to shoot the armor piercing on these main battery guns at destroyers because they will occasionally get full penetrations. Other times, though, when they get over pens and the damage falls off, you want to go with the HE. Now, we'll go over the specs on the ship as they are influenced by the Ernest Evans build, and I'll try to point out the differences in the next battle with the Mordoff build, because I'm almost thinking Mordoff is the way to go. Now, we've already kind of reviewed Evans for a previous video featuring the Burrows, so I'm going to assume you're all familiar with his skill set, and you've seen the build that we're running here. So what we've got on Burrows is hit points of 22,360. That is, of course, buffed by Evans' base trait. The HP is quite a bit lower than that. It is only 18,700 base, which does seem kind of low for a Tier 8 destroyer, and I think you want to buff it one way or another, either with Evans' base trait or maybe William Sims, or potentially you just want to use Bergamini to reduce the amount of damage you take as you take more damage. Also here, with these main battery guns, you can see the AP is even pretty effective against broadside battleships and their upper belt armor. It'll do a good amount of damage to them. These guns are 6 137mm guns, very unusual size for a destroyer. A bit larger than the typical 127 to 130mm you see, but not quite getting into light cruiser 150mm territory, like the German alternate destroyers, for example. With this Evans build, and this, I believe, is only using the main battery reload mod in the 4th slot. Well, with that, we've got a 5.8 second reload, although the base reload time is 7 seconds. And I think that's the major pain point on this particular ship and this line in general. the slow reload and the lack of DPM. But as you saw against the other enemy destroyer in the beginning, the AP can be absolutely devastating to angled targets, and if you can manufacture a situation where you're not able to be shot back at very easily, whether that's because you're in a smoke screen or just far away from the enemy destroyer, you can occasionally go toe-to-toe with more legitimate gunboats and have success. The HE shells on this ship deal a maximum of 2,200 damage, and they have a 9% fire chance. Penetration is only 23 millimeters. The AP, however, as you've seen, is very good. The maximum AP shell damage is 3,400, and we've got massively improved penetration angles. Now, on this build I'm running, I put Zhen Bing, the Pan-Asian destroyer commander, as one of the inspirations because he buffs the minimum ricochet angle by nearly 8 degrees. At base, Burroughs, Christopher, this whole line, their minimum ricochet angle is 60 degrees, and guaranteed is 67.5. Well, with Zhen Bing at the helm, the minimum ricochet angle of 60 degrees becomes 67.6, which is exactly zero point 0.1 degrees higher than the guaranteed ricochet angle, which means it's not going to do ricochet checks until 67.5 degrees. And that's excellent, especially for angled destroyers. That means that, you're going to have more leeway in actually getting pens on them. So there is that. The fuse time, though, on these AP shells is 0.01 seconds. And so sometimes I think when they're flat broadside or if you shoot at the superstructure, the fuse time is just too quick and the shell ends up over-penetrating. Also, the penetration numbers on this thing, this is with Ernest E. Evans at the helm, and he does have a skill that massively buffs the pen. At base, the point-blank pen is 310.3 millimeters. With the Evans buff, it's 356.9. And then even at maximum range, which on this build is 11.9 kilometers, the pen is still 107.9. That's more than enough to get through the upper belt armor of any kind of broadside large ship, like a battleship or a cruiser. And so I find that primarily this ship, and I think the line in general, wants to be shooting AP a lot of the time. It really only wants to switch to HE when it's shooting at an angled target and trying to get fires. The torpedoes, which we have going at Conqueror, those are maybe not the best. They only have a base speed of 44 knots, so they really are sea mines. Now, there is a skill on Evans which buffs them to 52 knots. Still incredibly slow, a little bit faster. There are 5 torpedoes in one quintuple launcher. They've got a base range of 10 km. The Evans skill that buffs the speed also reduces the range, so they're at 9.2 in this battle. But they've got a quick reload time of 85 seconds, and they do a maximum simulated damage of 24,000. We've actually got that buff to 25,200 with one of Evans's skills here. And the torpedo detectability range by sea is a mere 0.9 kilometers, almost deep water torpedoes. So they're very stealthy, but they're very slow. However, if you do hit them against anything, they really, really hurt. And then as for the AA, I don't think it's very good. I've been chased by a CV for an entire battle in this thing at one point, and I think it shot down a grand total of 15 planes, which I suppose is a lot, but not over the course of a 15-minute battle. For the maneuverability, 36 knot top speed, a little bit slower than that base. That is because of the speed flag. And a 680 meter turning circle with a 4-second rudder shift. As for the concealment, on this build, 6.1 kilometers by sea. That's using only the concealment mod, but once we get to the next battle, we'll have a little bit better concealment with Mordoff at the helm. And I kind of think Mordoff is the way to go. What you see from this battle here is just a very sort of average victory result in the Christopher. Some good damage against the enemy destroyers, some taking of caps, utilization of the radar, etc. And we're going to win this battle. The second one, well, you'll see how it goes, but we'll show you Mordoff at the helm. As for this one, it is a glorious victory for the blue team. And we end up with only 106,000 damage, but 3,000 base XP, which I suppose suggests we had some pretty decent battle impact. Anyway, on to the next battle with Vincent Mordoff at the helm. I'll show you the build here real quick. Inspirations are Chuck and Bergamini. Chuck for extra range, Bergamini for extra tankiness, because we are really not building into the survivability all that much with this. Although we do have 20,700 HP. I think that number I read to you, 18,000, is the HP on the stock hull. So it's a little bit higher than that base. It's actually 20,700 when you fully upgrade the ship. That would be the base HP. But the reason we're using Mordoff, of course, is because of the main battery reload. Now, Mordoff has, I think, 3 skills buffing that. Observant range in the first row, which reduces the reload by 5%. 1,000 cuts in the second row, which reduces it by 6%, although we don't have it fully maxed. And then his base trait, which reduces reload time by another 5.4%. So all in all, we've taken our 7-second base reload on Christopher and reduced it to 4.9. Still a little bit slow, but I think preferable to 5.8. Makes you a little bit more competitive against destroyers with a faster reload. The damage numbers are all the same. The only thing that's really different here on the Mordoff build is we're not enjoying the extra penetration from the special skill that Evans provides us. Now the armor-piercing pens 310 at point blank and only 92 at maximum range. With Chuck at the helm, the maximum range is, 11.9. I think we had him inspiring the other build too. I believe without Chuck, the range is a little bit less than that, like 11.7, 11.5. I suppose Chuck doesn't provide all that much of a range buff, but in addition to buffing the range slightly, Chuck's base trait also increases main battery damage against destroyers by 4%, and I think that's probably useful too when you have such a slow reload compared to other destroyers out there. Here you see an interesting example, by the way, of other destroyers, the Katsanis, and the AP not doing all that great damage there. It seems like you need a thicker destroyer hull that's slightly angled to get it to fully penetrate, and a lot of the times it does do over penetration. So it's kind of, I don't want to say a crapshoot to decide which shell to shoot at enemy destroyers, but both of them can be effective, of course. The HE is going to be more effective when the AP will either overpen or not pen at all. But when the AP does pen and gets full penetrations, the damage output is massive compared to the HE. So I think you do want to use it sometimes. Of course, we should also talk about the consumables, which I think I've neglected to mention. The Burrows has unlimited radar. So does the Christopher. It's the first ship, I believe, in the line to get that. I believe it's the Osborne at Tier 7. That one does have limited charges of radar, but Christopher, unlimited. And of course, the range on the radar is slightly lower than Burrows at Legendary Tier. It's 9 kilometers. It only lasts for 12 seconds. It can be buffed slightly with one of Evans's skills. And then it takes 142 seconds to cool down. We've also got 2 charges of the American Smokescreen base. It has a smokescreen dispersion time of 124 seconds and a reload time of 228. Of course, you can combine it with the radar in order to mitigate return damage from enemy destroyers. But I think we should talk a little bit more about the advanced radar skill as well. I know I gave sort of a review of it last week, featuring the Burrows thing, and I was talking about how, in principle, I think it's a little bit overpowered. I still think that, after playing this line a little bit more extensively, I think this ability to know for absolute certain that there is going to be a ship for you to reveal within your 9-kilometer radar range gives you much more leeway versus other ships that don't have that same gimmick. And the fact that the radar will ping the location of an undetected enemy ship also gives you more intelligence data that you wouldn't normally be able to get. I think these things, this line, will excel when it's played in a division and you can actually communicate the intelligence data that you're gathering with teammates who are guaranteed to listen to it and will benefit from it. Oh, we should also mention the smoke firing penalty on this thing, which I was just checking there, is 2.8 kilometers. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this battle here is because at the end of it, I think we're going to make a bit of a catastrophic mistake, and things are about to be going a little bit south for the blue team. I suppose they already are. We've just lost another ship, and now we're down 4 ships to the enemy's losing 2. Plus, we're being approached by this Atlantico, and I think we've left it a little too late to get out of the smoke screen. We'll continue to shoot him with the main battery guns, but eventually we are going to have to get out of the smoke screen and rely on our torpedoes. Now, with Mordoff at the helm, the torpedoes have their extremely slow, or actually, no, they have a faster speed somehow. What is buffing the speed of these torpedoes? I'm looking at, oh no, I'm looking at the wrong thing. I just looked at the Summers torpedoes. Anyway, we take out the Atlantico with our torpedoes, even though they're only going at 44 knots. Kinda doesn't matter at danger close range, and the damage that they do of 24,000, that's enough to dev strike battleships in situations like that. The problem is, even though taking out Atlantico and our team getting a couple more kills has almost even up the kill count here. We have 4 ships left, enemy has 5, and we have a CV where they don't, so we do have that as an advantage. Despite that, things are still going to continue going south for the blue team. And we've lost all of our HP. We only have 3,405 left. There's no destroyers left alive to fight, but there are 4 battleships and a cruiser. And these torpedoes, I think in a situation like this, while they were able to take out the Atlantico, it would be almost impossible to miss him at that kind of range unless I was the most hopeless potato in the whole game. But at longer ranges like this against Iowa and the other ships here, well, I don't know how successful we're going to be with the torpedoes, so we may have to rely on the main battery guns, and we may need some help from our remaining teammates who don't exactly look like they're poised to help us. You can see the Graf Zeppelin is completely frozen back there, even though the enemy is obviously going to break through this alpha flank and push right into our spawn, where they will undoubtedly find the Graf Zeppelin and send him back to port once they chew through the friendly battleship that's standing between them and the Graf Zeppelin. And that battleship doesn't exactly have any HP left. So we're just kind of left wondering here, what do we do? As you can see, we haven't launched the torpedoes yet because we just don't have a good bead on any of these battleships. They're going to have to finish off that last remaining blue battleship before they do something else. So we decide we're going to smoke up. Of course, this smoke does last for a long time, and with this slightly buffed reload using Mordoff, well, hopefully we'll be able to get enough damage into Iowa, and in this case, rely on the 9% fire chance to hopefully light a fire that he can't put out. I don't know if that's going to happen. I should also say, while it's on my mind, if you don't have Mordoff, which probably a lot of you don't, because I believe he was a Halloween commander years ago, and he may come back this October for sale. I think sometimes they bring back their Halloween commanders, but if you don't have him, he essentially has the same skill tree as William Halsey. The only thing is his base trait reduces main battery reload time. Halsey's increases destroyer AP damage. But with Halsey at the helm, using the observant range skill and the other one in the third row that cuts down on the reload, you would have a 5.1 second reload, and the AP would do 3,500 damage instead of 3,400. So I suppose there's that, and I would use Halsey in lieu of Mordoff if you don't have him. I think ultimately this build, in spite of the results you're about to see in this battle, I think this build is probably the way to go. I think you do want to buff the DPM, because as I said, against other ships, other destroyers with really fast reloads like Gearing, Daring, and the Tier 8 equivalents of those lines, those ships in a close range fight are going to melt you. Whether you're in Christopher, Burroughs, the Tier 7 destroyer, all of them, their reloads are just too slow. So if it's a straight up DPM contest, they're going to win every time. Now, that being said, I think buffing the reload time on your main battery guns will help even out those fights a little bit more, and then you've got to rely on other things like islands, smoke screens, and the radar consumable, and distance between you and the target. And if you play those engagements right, I find that this line can be pretty effective at sinking other enemy destroyers. It would be more effective if you had teammates that could support you in your spotting with this radar consumable and things like that, but it can be effective when you build into the DPM or the reload. It can even be effective with Evans, but I think after playing this whole line fairly extensively, I think I might stick with Mordoff as the commander all along the line, just because I am persuaded, and I think there's a lot of people out there in the community who will think like this. I am persuaded by the idea of buffing the main battery reload time as the main thing you want to do on this line. I did try, as I said earlier on in the video, to use Burke for maximum range and try to make more of a cruiser-style destroyer, like the Khabarovsk, for example. Just doesn't work, I don't think, because the kiting angles are really awful, and if you're going to be doing any kind of like open water gunboating at maximum range, you want to be able to kite while getting all your DPM on target. Anyway, here's an opportunity for a solo warrior. There's less than 3 minutes left to go in this battle. We are ahead on points for the moment. The enemy team is going to overtake us because they've taken 2 out of 3 of the caps, but we held them for long enough to have a points lead. And if we play this right, we very well could win. So as we set this up, and this is, well, you'll see. As we set this up, I'll just say that I think this new line is a bit weird. It's a little bit complicated. It's got this advanced radar gimmick that I think is, in principle, overpowered, but I don't think a lot of people in the community are necessarily going to think that just because the range of the radar is so long. But the fact that you can guarantee to use it to spot something in the range, that I think is overpowered in the same way I think stealth radar is overpowered. And I think the intelligence data it gives you, I think that's just too useful to pass up. That being said, I don't know in the long term how terrible of an effect this is going to be on the game. Certainly if you're a destroyer and you see one of these things on the enemy team, I think you're going to be a little bit hesitant to push in on the off chance that you're going to get radared and you're not even going to be able to know about it. If you are detected by this advanced radar ping, you have no notification of that. It's not like if you are detected by the twisted track skill, gives you that little located indicator so that you know something is in the vicinity with twist and track. Not the same with this advanced radar thing. I think maybe that ought to be addressed, and you ought to know if you've been pinged by the advanced radar so you at least kind of have counterplay. The main counterplay to radar on cruisers is that, well, you see the cruiser before you get into its radar range, so you can turn around and run away. I think you should be able to get an idea of if you're in the radar range of one of these things. Anyway, this battle is drawing to a close. We've got an opportunity here. We've got torpedoes going at the 2 enemy battleships that were pushing through that gap. Even though they're slow, they are very stealthy, and they're very good at being zoning torps. And then we've got this anchorage here with approximately 10,000 HP. You saw what this thing could do in the opening clip against a more lightly armored target, but even against an anchorage at 6 kilometers, should be able to get citadels. However, we don't necessarily aim exactly correctly, and we do get 1 shatter. Maybe if we aimed a little bit higher, and maybe if we didn't go behind this island right here, because we do get the kill on the battleship, but we lose sight of the anchorage. Now, I only had 3,400 HP left, but we were going to lose that game if I didn't sink that anchorage. And so in retrospect, I wish I had come to a complete stop and not gone behind that island. Even if I had sunk, the results would have been the same. But if I had a little bit more time to shoot at that broadside anchorage, I might have been able to sink him, and I might have turned this into a glorious victory. This is the second tragedy of this kind of nature that has befallen me on this line. Had a game like that in Burrows with a lot more damage and a lot more of a heartbreaker, but somehow I deleted it. Really wanted to show it to you. Anyway, I think this line is interesting. I think it's certainly worth grinding to Burrows. I would say it's a good destroyer, but it's a weird one. This whole line is got a very odd design, and I think probably building into the DPM is the way to go. So, hope you enjoyed these rambling thoughts on Christopher. Give the video a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.